Welcome back to The Lost Tactician, where we dig beneath the surface of history to uncover the forgotten innovations that defined survival in humanity's darkest hours. Today, we're stepping into the frozen trenches and snow-covered forests of World War II, where an enemy as merciless as any bullet waited to claim its victims. The cold? Imagine fighting not just against enemy forces, but against your own body shutting down, your feet going numb, blackening, dying from the inside out. Now imagine that salvation came not from military supply chains or advanced technology, but from the forest itself, from sticky golden pine resin that soldiers smeared inside their boots. This is the story of desperate ingenuity, of how nature became armor, and how a simple hack saved countless lives in the most brutal winter campaigns of the war. When we think of World War II casualties, we picture battlefields scarred by artillery, cities reduced to rubble, soldiers falling to gunfire. But in campaigns across the Eastern Front, the Italian mountains and the Battle of the Bulge, Frostbite proved to be a silent executioner that rivaled any weapon in its lethality. During the winter of 1944-45 alone, American forces reported over 15,000 cold-weather injuries, more casualties than some entire battles produced. Soldiers would wake in their foxholes, unable to feel their toes, only to discover hours later that tissue had begun to die, turning black and putrid. The progression was horrifying. First the numbness, then the burning pain as circulation attempted to return, finally the gangrenous rot that meant amputation or death. Field surgeons performed emergency amputations in makeshift stations, sawing through frozen limbs while enemy artillery thundered in the distance. For every soldier who lost a foot to frostbite, dozens more were rendered combat ineffective, unable to march, unable to fight, barely able to survive. Standard-issue leather boots, adequate for autumn campaigns, became death traps when winter descended. Water seeped through seams and stitching, soaking wool socks that had no chance to dry in sub-zero temperatures. The combination of moisture and cold created the perfect conditions for trench foot and frostbite, turning feet into frozen blocks of agony. Military command recognized the crisis, but supply lines couldn't deliver specialized winter boots fast enough. Soldiers needed a solution, and they needed it immediately. The discovery of the pine resin method likely didn't come from official military manuals or scientific research. It emerged from the ground level, from soldiers remembering old-world knowledge or stumbling upon nature's properties through trial and error. In the pine forests of Europe, where armies fought and died, the trees themselves offered salvation. Wounded pines bled golden resin, a sticky sap that indigenous peoples and rural communities had used for centuries to waterproof vessels and seal wounds. Some soldier, perhaps remembering a grandfather's trick or simply desperate enough to try anything, heated pine resin over a small fire until it became pliable and began working it into the leather of his boots. The results were remarkable enough that word spread through units like wildfire. This simple, accessible material could transform inadequate footwear into genuine protection against the killing cold. Pine resin's effectiveness stemmed from a perfect combination of natural properties that modern chemistry can now explain, but that soldiers understood only through results. The resin's molecular structure makes it intensely hydrophobic, meaning it repels water with remarkable efficiency. When soldiers heated chunks of hardened resin until they softened into a thick, honey-like consistency, they could smear it liberally across every vulnerable point of their boots. Along the seams where thread created tiny channels for moisture, around the sole where leather met leather, across stress points where cracks had begun to form. As the resin cooled, it hardened into a waterproof seal that prevented snowmelt and slush from penetrating to the interior. But waterproofing was only the first benefit. The resin also created an additional insulating layer, its low thermal conductivity meaning it transferred heat poorly, acting as a barrier that kept warmth inside the boot rather than allowing it to leach into frozen ground. Soldiers would sometimes apply multiple coats, building up thickness that could mean the difference between functional feet and frostbitten stumps. The adhesive quality of the resin also helped bind separating layers of worn leather, essentially reinforcing boots that were falling apart from months of hard campaigning. The application process became a ritual in winter camps, small fires heating chunks of amber resin, soldiers carefully working the warm sap into every crack and crevice, the sharp, clean scent of pine cutting through the usual odors of unwashed men and decay that pervaded the front lines. The pine resin hack represented just one example of the remarkable field innovations that emerged when soldiers faced conditions their equipment couldn't handle. Nature became both enemy and ally, offering solutions to those observant enough to recognize them. Moss served as wound dressing, its natural antiseptic properties helping prevent infection when medical supplies ran short. Birch bark could be fashioned into emergency kindling that burned even when damp. Soldiers learned to recognize which plants indicated water sources and which could supplement meager rations. This grassroots innovation stood in stark contrast to the industrial warfare surrounding it. While tanks and aircraft represented cutting-edge technology, survival often depended on Stone Age knowledge, on understanding how to use what the land provided. Today's soldiers wear boots engineered with Gore-Tex membranes, synthetic insulation, and vapor barrier systems that those World War II infantry could scarcely have imagined. Yet the pine resin hack remains a powerful reminder that survival sometimes demands we look beyond technology to the fundamental resources nature provides. Those soldiers who smeared sticky sap into worn leather weren't just improvising. They were carrying forward thousands of years of human adaptation, proving that ingenuity matters more than equipment. If this forgotten innovation resonated with you, hit that like button and share this video with anyone who appreciates how history and survival intertwine. Subscribe to The Lost Tactician for more deep dives into the forgotten innovations that kept soldiers alive when everything else failed. Until next time, remember, sometimes the most powerful technology is the one that's been waiting in the forest all along.